All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Anti-War Radio. I'm Scott Horton. And our next guest on the show is Dr. Ron Paul. He's a congressman from the 14th District of Texas down there on the Gulf Coast. And he is the chairman of the Monetary Policy Committee, subcommittee of the Financial Services Committee in the House of Representatives. And he's been writing a bunch of great articles and giving a lot of great speeches lately concerning the war in Libya. Welcome back to the show, Ron. How are you?
Thank you, Scott. Good to be with you.
I'm very happy to have you here. So what do you predict for the short term in the American war in Libya?
Well, I think the short term is just going to continue to escalate. I don't think they'll be walking away. I don't think they're going to stop, and we'll continue to spend money and send weapons. The Marines are not too far away. The CIA is already involved. And the only question is who's in charge. And they'd like to be responsible for everything. That is, our American leaders at the same time put the management on the NATO and then, claim that it's NATO and not the United States. So I think we're already deeply embedded there. It's probably going to continue for a long time and just contribute to the mess that we're already involved in.
Well, I guess knowing how it is in Washington, D.C., when there's a blunder like this, a pretty obvious blunder where they have no long-term exit strategy, it seems like, default back to the State Department system of doing things like in Afghanistan and Iraq. We'll have to create a democracy and train up an army to protect it and all this now, right? I mean, how can they back out short of that?
Yeah, it'll get so messy that they'll figure, to salvage anything that we have to establish the government, and already they've sent a CIA agent over there, an ex-Libyan, to go over there and be in charge. So they've already, our government's already picked the person they want to run the country. The big question is they're going to pretend they're not going to use military force to kill Gaddafi, and it's just a mess. It's just they're in a war, but they won't call it a war, and they won't fight it like a war, and they shouldn't be in the war, and yet they think something good will come of this, and I cannot conceive of anything beneficial coming from it.
All right, now your colleague, Representative Dennis Kucinich, has gone on the record saying that this is impeachable. Do you agree with him about that?
Yeah, I think it's impeachable in the sense that he disobeys the Constitution, but how many presidents have done that in the last 100 years or so? It's an offense that is unconstitutional. Congress should take it upon himself. I don't imagine it's likely to lead, to somebody introducing a resolution to impeach him, because I think it would distract from, something we can do more immediate, like denying all funding for the war, or make the Congress vote on this one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, that certainly would be something to see, the Congress at least attempt to deny funding, but Hillary Clinton made the statement yesterday or the day before that even if Congress did refuse to provide funding for it, that they would just ignore it under the plenary and inherent powers of the presidency.
Yeah. When you think about it, how secret funding can occur, through the Federal Reserve System, what does it matter? What does it matter that Congress is? We're totally irrelevant. Just released figures said the Federal Reserve had loaned money to banks and other governments of $3.3 trillion. So, if you need funding and the Fed create it, why not? And they set up a central bank, but the rebels in Libya have already set up a central bank, so maybe we've loaned them. I wonder if they've come to the discount window yet. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely out of control. And, yes, they can ignore what the Congress does. If they don't have enough money, they have ways of just printing the money. That's why this thing will continue until they, just ruin the value of the dollar completely.
Mm. Well, it seems like, John V. Walsh was on the show and saying, we really should pursue impeachment here, and he was saying, this would be really a great end to the empire, would be instead of waiting for the dollar to break and for total catastrophe, if we could just say, no, that's it, this is the final straw, and we're going to remove this guy from power, and we're going to mandate an end to these things. And so if you guys were to suspend the payments and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Robert Gates were to just continue anyway, there's your grounds for impeachment and perhaps a real beginning to the end of the empire, short of that economic catastrophe that you talk about.
Well, that's theoretically a possibility. It's not likely to happen. If two or three of us introduce a resolution of impeachment right now, it wouldn't go to the floor. But if, let's say it did go to the floor, just to prove that the support isn't there, you might get 8 or 10 votes under today's circumstances, and then that can be construed as a vote of endorsement. Say, oh, nobody cares. I mean, they're not. It must be legal if the Congress won't vote for the impeachment.
Right.
So it's not an easy problem to solve, but Congress, I don't think right now has the backbone to do anything about it. There's a lot, even though I have to admit there's better talk now than there was, with the Republicans when Bush was doing it. There were hardly any Republicans saying anything. But I think a much larger number today of people I talk to on the Republican side are willing to take the president on and declare this unconstitutional and illegal. Not that they'd be looking to impeach, but at least there's more resistance. But that's pretty traditional. The Republicans were pretty much opposed to Clinton when he was bombing in Bosnia and Serbia in that area. Republicans, oh, this is horrible, this was horrible. But then when Bush did it, it was wonderful, wonderful. Now, some of those Democrats that were with some of us, a few Republicans who opposed Bush's wars, they're now supporting Obama's wars. So we need a little bit more consistency on, and it's just a shame that Congress, or especially the House, is so willing to give up its responsibilities and deliver all this power to the executive branch.
Mm-hmm. Well, now back to the situation actually in Libya. You cite Michael Scheuer in one of your recent pieces here. I'm not sure if it was a speech or article you wrote about the dangers of the unintended consequences of intervening there. And I wonder whether that part of it is really being discussed on Capitol Hill at all, about the effect this could have for the broader threat of terrorist attacks on the United States.
They talk about the CIA going in, and they've asked some public questions about that, and sometimes, the administration just, ducks it, or most of the time they will. The issue of blowback, I don't hear that brought up too often, because I still get a little bit of grief over that when I bring it up. Matter of fact, I was in a station just a little while ago, and the host was saying, well, wasn't it true that you got booed and all this because you brought this subject up like that's going too far because if you say there's a possibility of blowback, that means you're blaming America. Well, we don't blame America. You and I are Americans. We don't get the blame, but we can blame bad political judgment and bad policy that may have ramification that actually hurts America rather than helps. That's quite a bit of difference. But unfortunately, that discussion isn't going well up here. They're not quite willing to get to this point, but there will be a lot of Republicans now talking out against what Obama's doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always thought that some of the most important things I ever see you say on TV, which you do talk about often, is the reality of how we got into this mess and what it's all about. And as you say, not just for foreign policy reasons, but for domestic reasons as well. And I was actually just talking with my previous guest about Islamophobia in America, because Islam is said to be the motive for the terrorists to do what they do against us. And it seems like in this time more than ever, we really need anti-demagogues like yourself who can just say, no, this is not about Islam. It's about, the consequences of intervention.
It's very important for them to, broaden the enemy in order to justify what they were doing. If they admitted the truth and said, yeah, there are radicals in all religion, and maybe they were motivated by, from their point of view, by reason, and saying, look, this is what's happening to us, and we're going to do such and such. We're going to commit these acts of terror, and they're a small number. That's not enough. Then you only have to attack and get the people who did the harm. But if you can say, if you can build up Islamophobia, then you can justify going into all these countries. And then you not only go and try to get the bad guys that might have attacked us, which was a very narrow target since there weren't that many. I bet you there were less than 100 even knew what was going on. But now what Obama has done is further endorse the principle of preventive war, which is initiating force, which is aggression.
All right, well, I sure hope you run for president again, Dr. Paul. Last time was the greatest speaking tour on behalf of peace and individual liberty ever, and I know at least here in Los Angeles, the Ron Paul kids are just raring to go. So, get to it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Okay.
That's Dr. Ron Paul, everybody. He represents District 14 on Texas Gulf Coast.